Amen. So if you're wondering where Pastor Chris is at, him and Amy are taking a much-deserved vacation and time away. But for those of you who do not know me, my name is Chris, and I'm also your friend. And so it is great to be here. Those that don't know me, my name is Chris Lee. I've been here at the church now for about coming up on 3 years. I'm the administrative pastor, so I take care of facilities, finances, a lot of those things just to allow those that are working in a department, children's, youth, all those departments, so they can just focus on the ministry and doing the work, and we love it here in Northwest Arkansas. I am also a Georgia native, a transplant that came from Georgia. Pastor Chris and I, we've known each other for about 15, 16 years. And before, we had a common mentor, which is how we got connected and coming out here. But what he asked me to do today is to share my story of how I came to know Christ and a little bit of how I ended up here. And so I hope it'll resonate with you. But before we dive into that, I do want to take another moment again, and if you guys will join me, to thank all the dads here. Give them a round of applause. And then I also do want to note, I know there's some of you this morning, my heart was grieved, but I also rejoiced. I was on social media taking a moment, and there's a friend of mine whose dad fell ill this past fall and passed away shortly thereafter. And he commented this morning, he goes, hey, this Father's Day is going to look different. And I know for some of you, Father's Day looks a little bit different than what you had expected. And what grieved me, that friend, his father was my first small group teacher when I came to know the Lord. And so Jack Lee, no family relation, but he was the one pouring into me as a young man, and him and his wife, dear friends to me and have meant so much to me over the years. But as I said, I want to share my story, my journey of faith, of how I came to know the Lord, how I came to be in ministry. It's a lot of times when people come up here, you hear a story of, hey, they had a rough childhood, they had a rough upbringing, they were involved maybe drugs, alcohol, whatever that may be. Or you hear of, hey, I grew up in church, my grandfather was a pastor, my father was a pastor, and that is a story that we often hear. My story isn't the one you hear as often, but I think there's a lot of people. I think there's people in this room, I think there's people in our community that have a very similar story. And that being this, I grew up in a very moral household. We didn't go to church. I can remember a handful of times we got invited by friends to go, and we would go. But we were invited to go to church, and we would go. To be real honest, I didn't think about it a whole lot. You know, I thought people went to church because they were trying to be a good person. And the way I looked at it, like, hey, we're good people, check the box, we can go play golf on Sunday morning. There was I didn't have that foundation of what it meant to know Christ, to see his transforming grace in my life. And so we went about our day. My parents, they served their community. They loved on people. They cared for people. From the outside in, people probably looked at my family and went, oh, there's a good Christian family. And you guys probably have neighbors that you're looking at and you think, oh, maybe they're good Christian folks. But I grew up, pretty typical family. My dad, when I was born, was in the Air Force. My mom was a civilian contractor for the U.S. government. They met on a military base in O'Fallon, Illinois. Scott Air Force Base is where I was born. We moved when I was about 6 years old to Georgia. I consider Georgia home. Go Dogs. And so I grew up in the metro Atlanta area. My dad retired, though. He went in the Air Force when he was young, so he retired. He did his 20 years, and he retired. I was still young. I was about 11 years old when he retired. And he decided that, hey, when you retire from the Air Force, you become a professional golfer. Logical sequence there. And so, no, he was always an avid golfer. They were building a golf course near our house, and the gentleman that was building the golf course, who was also a golf pro, struck up a conversation with my dad. He was a Vietnam vet, the golf pro, and he just said, hey, Johnny, when you get done here, why don't you, when you get done with your service, why don't you come and join me out here and become a golf pro? And so that's what he did. My mom, as I mentioned, was a civilian contractor. She did network stuff, various jobs for the U.S. government. When my dad retired, my mom was still working for the government, spent several years doing that. We grew up, we had a few dogs over the years. We had that one cat that my dad didn't want. We found it at the golf course. It was a stray little kitten. My dad was adamant that we were not going to have a cat. We were not going to have a cat. By the end of the day, we had a cat. And my dad did not like that cat. And guess who that cat's favorite person was in the whole wide world? My dad, of course. So you guys have heard that story. But like I said, I felt like we were a pretty typical family. We looked like the people that lived around us. My neighbors, I knew people went to church, but I didn't see it as a priority. And like I said, I didn't see a lot that was different in their lives that was in our life because, like I said, we were trying to be good people. We just went about our life. And we have people in our community that are doing the same thing right now. They're just going about their life. They're trying to be good people. They're trying to make a living, provide for their families, provide for the kids. The only distinct influence that I can remember in my life, Christian influence, was my Grandma Lee. Grandma Lee was all about this tall. She was very soft-spoken, and she was feisty. And it was amazing. I loved Grandma Lee, loved all my grandparents, had an amazing family life. I can remember my grandmother sitting on the end of her couch. I still, you've got those images that are kind of burned, they're etched in your memory that you'll never forget. And I can remember where my grandmother sat on her couch, kind of this plaid tweed couch. She sat on the end. Her Bible always sat there on the table next to it. She had our Daily Bread quarterly devotional. If you know what I'm talking, do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, I see some people. If you don't know what that is, it just means you're too young, and you don't know what that is. But I can remember my grandmother spending countless hours sitting there reading her Bible, reading Scripture. I can remember crawling up into my grandma's lap as a little boy, and her loving on me and telling me how much she loved me and telling me, more importantly, how much Jesus loved me. And so I can even remember, I love sharing this, especially now. She's been with the Lord for many years now. But my grandmother, for my birthday, she would always send me a check. And the checks would be made out to it'd be like $34.10, or it'd be $20.11. On the memo line, she would write a book of the Bible. And so that 34:10 was for Psalms 34:10. The Proverbs 20:11 was for Proverbs 20, verse 11. And those passages speak to a young man growing up to know the Lord and to honor the Lord. At the time, I didn't understand what it meant. I just said, oh, Grandma, it's something Bible related. Now that I'm older, I'm like, Grandma, did you know there's like Psalms 119 and Psalms 150? I'm sure she did. But she deeply loved and cared for me. And let me be clear, that's not to say there weren't any Christians in our life. I didn't think about it. I'm not going to speak for my parents in that regard, but I just didn't think about it. I was going about my life. I was going about my day as I moved in, kind of what I would say are those teenage years. As a lot of teenagers, I was looking to have fun, hanging out with my friends. Maybe on the periphery, I was playing golf. Once my dad became a golf pro, I spent most of my life on a golf course. I'd go out with him a lot of times early in the morning at 6, 7 a.m. to open the golf course, and he'd work, do whatever he had to do. He'd leave. I'd stay at the golf course. It practically was my second home at that point. I'd play golf with my buddies. I'd hit balls. I just enjoyed hanging out, thought maybe one day become a golf pro, wasn't really sure about what all that was going on. But as I got into my teenage years, I was a typical teenager. I loved hanging out with my friends. I would go to the occasional party. In that, I did. I'm not going to stand up here and say, "Hey, I was an absolute saint during that." I started partaking of some stuff that I shouldn't have, and it wasn't peer pressure. It was just, hey, I was just hanging out with my friends, and that's apparently what you do when you're a high school kid at a party. And I didn't really think a whole lot out of it. I had friends in high school that were Christians, and I mainly knew that they were Christians because they would go to FCA. They would talk about occasionally going to church. And even after I did later come to know the Lord and told them and shared about getting baptized, like, oh, we thought you were a Christian already. And so I was just trying to live that life. But I did begin to start seeing in some of them that there was something in their life that was different from my life. And so I didn't know what it was. I didn't know anything about the Bible. I'm not 100% sure there was a Bible in our household at this point in time. And so I didn't know a whole lot about it. But as I got into the junior year of high school, I started noticing a distinct difference between how I lived and how those that professed to be Christians, those that I saw that were actively living out their faith, they were participating in Wednesday night church. They were there on Sunday mornings. They participated with FCA. They invited me to church on several occasions. But there was still a disconnect because I didn't know anything about the Bible. I didn't know anything about Jesus. I knew who he was, but I didn't know a whole lot about him. And so during the spring of my junior year, my friend Greg began inviting me to church. And he was persistent. He's like, hey, come to FCA. Hey, come to be with us on Wednesday night. Hey, join me on Sunday morning. And Greg was very persistent to the point to where I've told him, you were very annoying. But I'm grateful they did. I would blow him off. I kept blowing him off until he invited me to a lock-in. Who in here knows what a lock-in is? Okay, good. I see the hands raised up. If you don't know what a lock-in is, that's where you take a lot of teens, not a lot of supervision. You throw them in a building, you throw them in a room, and the idea is you're going to stay up all night and play games, do some stuff, have a good time, have a great time, all in the name of fun. I don't know about you guys, but now I define fun. I want to be in bed by about 9 o'clock if I can. And if I'm really having fun, I may push that to 10 p.m. But I finally said, you know what? I am willing to go. And here's why I went. So mind you, at this point in time, I'm 16, about to turn 17, but they're doing this lock-in at this place down the road from us. They had go-karts, they had laser tag, and they had arcade games. As a 16, 17-year-old boy, what could be more fun than staying up all night, driving go-karts, playing laser tag, and playing arcade games? Although, even as a 16, 17-year-old, driving a go-kart after being sleep deprived, probably not the best idea. I do think there was times where we got thrown off the track and were warned that if we didn't get our act together, we weren't going to be able to drive go-karts around. And if you're trying to get a visual of what this place is, if you've ever been to Andretti's, this place was kind of like Andretti's with a lot less safety measures. And so it did eventually get shut down. But I had a good time. I met some new friends. And at one point in the evening, the gospel was proclaimed. The student pastor of that church stood up and shared about Christ, talked about Christ desiring to have a relationship with us. And that kind of started that moment of when I started realizing there may be more to this. that maybe Christianity is not what I thought. It's not just about being a good person. After that lock-in, Greg invited me to come to church on a Sunday. I agreed to go only because there was a girl at the lock-in. What? There was a girl at the lock-in, and I heard that she went to the church, and so I figure, well, I mean, I probably ought to go check her out at church. My motives were not necessarily pure, but I went to church, and after a couple weeks, I fell under deep conviction one Sunday. And I'll be real honest, I can't even tell you that morning what the pastor preached about. It was Dr. Nelson Price at Roswell Street Baptist Church in Marietta, Georgia. He preached, and he gave the invitation, and I looked at Greg. He was sitting there next to me, and I told him, I said, I think I need to go forward. And he asked me why, and I go, I'm not really sure, but I really just feel like I need to respond. A large church there, Roswell Street's a large church there in Marietta. They probably had 3,000 or 4,000 people there that morning. I was the only one who responded that morning. So in front of several thousand people, I walked down to the front of the altar. They took me, they had, I can still remember, Dr. Gupta was his name, took me by the hand. We walked over into a side room with me and Greg, and he looked at me, and Dr. Gupta said, Chris, what'd you come forward for today? And I looked at him, and you know how I responded? I don't know. And he begins to talk and begins to share. And I finally looked at Dr. Gupta, and this is the best that I could come up with, and I just said, Dr. Gupta, Greg's been a good friend for a couple years. We go to high school together. There's something in his life. There is a peace, there is a joy in his life that I don't have. And I wasn't a sad kid. You know, I was enjoying life. But Greg was different. And I said, I don't know what it is about him, but I want that in my life. And so there in that counseling room, Dr. Gupta walked through the gospel. And that morning, I gave my heart and life to Jesus Christ. That was March 24th of 1996. I had friends that went to another church closer to my home. And so shortly thereafter, I started going to church there. Just from a convenience standpoint, I had more friends. It was close to my house. I could get there a lot quicker. The student ministry, I had some friends in my class that had come to Christ or rededicated their life to Christ about that same time. And so I started going there. I told the student pastor that I had recently come to know Christ. And about a month later, I was baptized. And we had a student associate by the name of Kevin Ross. Kevin took a group of us that had all recently come to know the Lord and just said, hey, why don't you guys start coming over on Tuesday nights, and we're going to take some time to go through the Word, and we'll talk about what it means to be a Christian, what it means to be a follower of Christ, what it means to be a disciple. And so it was myself, about 5 other guys, Kevin. He was married, had a couple kids, so they were always running around. I often describe Kevin, and he and I are still in contact to this day, but Kevin, I describe him as the Mr. Miyagi of discipleship. And here's why. So we show up one day for D group, and I'm getting out of my car, I'm grabbing my Bible, grabbing my notebook, and Kevin sees me, he's like, hey, Chris, you can leave that in the car, you're not gonna need that. I said, okay, kind of weird, we're here to study the Bible and talk about the Bible, and I'm gonna leave my Bible in the car? He goes, yep, not gonna need it, we're good. And so we go around back by his garage, and he's got a pile of lumber there. He's got some other things there. And me and my buddies were gathered around. And he said, hey, we're going to build something. I said, what are we going to build? He goes, don't worry about it. He goes, I'm going to tell you what you need to do. And so he proceeds to tell us, like, hey, you need to take this board, you need to cut it to this length. So we, saw, I'm 17 years old by this point in time. I'm thinking this may be the day that I lose an arm or a leg. I haven't done a whole lot of woodwork at this point in my life. But we start building things, and I'm looking at Kevin, and I remember telling Kevin, I said, hey, Kevin, this would be a lot easier and probably a lot faster if you would tell me what we are doing. He goes, don't worry about it. So we keep going along. Well, finally, we're starting to see some shape. I'm like, we're making a box. We're forming a box. And so I still don't know what we're going for, but Kevin's daughter comes running out, and she's, I'm 17. She's probably 7, 8 years old at this point in time. And she comes running out, and she goes, Dad, does this mean I get a bunny now? And I look over, and I go, what bunny? He goes, well, Dad said that we didn't have a bunny cage, and so I couldn't get a bunny because we didn't have a bunny cage. And so we're going to build a bunny cage. And so I found out then that that's what we were doing. I don't know at that point in time if that was going to actually be a lesson or if he just was using free labor. But he did. He ended up going and talking about it. He's talking about our journey as Christians. And he said, hey, we're not always going to know where God is taking us, but what God is asking us to do is to be obedient to the next step. He's not always going to paint a picture of where you're at, what your future holds. And as a 17-year-old, I had no idea what the future held. But you're not going to know. And it's a lesson that I've tried to stick with me to this day that I often remember. And so we got the Bible, we would read, we'd spend all the time. And people often ask, that's why Pastor often talks about D groups and the importance of D groups. Did it make a difference? Well, several of us that were in that group, there was 5 specifically. 4 of those are today serving in full-time Christian ministry. The one that I posted, that his dad, he is probably preaching right now in his church in Ackworth, Georgia, one of the fastest growing churches in the state of Georgia. One of them is over in Washington State preaching the gospel. It's a little early out there. He's probably not preaching just yet. I don't think their service starts that early. But we took seriously what we were learning, and we took the Great Commission in Matthew 28 seriously. We realized that we needed to share the gospel with our classmates. And so we got out, we would do anything and everything that we could possibly do to share with our friends. We would invite them. We would actually go meet at our high school before Wednesday night as a meeting point, and then we would carpool to Wednesday night. But during that time, we saw the student ministry grow from just under 200 to over 600 in 1 year. And the vast majority of those were people that came to know Christ either through us sharing with them or them coming on a Wednesday night, inviting them, and them hearing the gospel and coming to know Christ. It wasn't uncommon for us to do a student event and have over 1,000 teenagers come join us. And they were our friends. We were just trying to share with what God gave us and entrusted us with, this influence that he gave us by the evidence of our changed life. And is that all that happened? Not at all. Like I said, I wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't perfect. My parents would definitely agree with that. But about a year after I came to know the Lord, my mom came to me and just said, hey, I think your dad and I are going to come visit church on Sunday. And so through that process, my parents came to church. They came to faith, and they have been active in church ever since, simply by seeing the change that had happened in their son's life. People see the difference when you live out the difference. My mom and dad may be watching right now. They often tune into the service. And it means a lot to know that they are living a life for the Lord now and following Him with all their days. So about this same time, though, my parents, come to know the Lord. They're getting plugged into church. I began to wrestle. God's doing a work in my life. I didn't know exactly what that meant. I didn't know exactly what God was trying to teach me. But I knew because it was the same feeling I had as He was drawing me close to Him and then the call of salvation on my life. But I felt like God was calling me into full-time vocational ministry. He was calling me to be a pastor, but to be honest, I struggled. And the reason being, I didn't grow up, like I said, I didn't grow up in church. And so my limited church experience by this point was, 1 year experience. And the idea that I had of going into ministry was what we see Pastor Chris do up here every Sunday, of getting up and proclaiming the gospel and preaching. And to be honest, I didn't see myself doing that. I love to teach. I love to preach. But it's not something that I have to do on a daily basis. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little anxious being up here this morning. I wrote out my story. I know my story, and here you go. I wrote it out because I was worried that I'd get a little nervous and I would forget something. But then you do have some like Pastor Chris who they're a sermon waiting to preach. I've been places with pastor, even my former pastor. Someone didn't show up, a preacher didn't show up, and they're just sitting there like, hey, you need me to do it? I promise you, I would not be the one raising my hand in that situation like, oh no, he didn't show up, we need someone to preach. Who's going to do it? Kevin and a couple others just encouraged me. They said, hey, take some time, pray about it, see what God is leading you to do, and just pray earnestly that God will make it abundantly clear. And if you have your Bibles, you're welcome to turn to this verse, Isaiah 6:8. If you know the story of Isaiah, Isaiah means the Lord saves, the Lord's salvation, just depending on what translation you're reading. But in the book of Isaiah, and this is what I was studying at the time. So of all the books in the Bible, here I am, 17 years old, wrestling with this call to ministry. And I start studying Isaiah. And here's what I see in Isaiah. We see Isaiah getting this vision. It's a big vision, the first few chapters. A very grand vision. And the Lord is talking about the judgment that He's going to bring upon the nation of Israel. They've been disobedient. They've turned their back. Once again, these are Isaiah's people. And God is basically like, hey, someone's got to go tell them how bad they are. I don't know about you. I don't like being that person. It is not fun to call anybody out. And mind you, when Isaiah is receiving this call, most scholars believe that Isaiah was around 17 or 18 years old, which in my mind makes it even tougher. Can you imagine 17, 18-year-old going up to their people, to the nation? I just think of like having my grandparents there in front of me and going, hey, you did wrong. Like, this isn't going to end well. I can see good old Grandpa Lee going, you said what? But as I was starting to read, and you see in chapter 6, First part, you see these feelings of inadequacy, which is what I was struggling with. And in Isaiah 6:8, this is what the Lord used. A pastor touched on this passage a little while back, and then I told him at that moment, I said, this is the passage that God used to confirm the call in my life. And so God has given Isaiah this grand vision, and he's told him there is a task at hand, and he needs someone to do it. And here we go. We see in Isaiah 6:8, God asked Isaiah, who will I send? Who will go for us? And I said, here I am. Send me. It was pretty simple. It wasn't, I need to go get training. It wasn't, hey, I've got a few more questions. Isaiah simply said, here I am. Send me. And at that point in time, I went and told my student pastor, I said, hey, this is it. I believe God's called me to ministry. I don't know exactly what that looks like. At the beginning, I thought maybe I was going to go into Christian counseling. And so I went off to Liberty University, got my degree in psychology from there. While I was serving in ministry, got plugged in several ways. But the key thing is that I just laid my yes on the table. I said, God, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that means, but the answer is yes. However you desire to use me, however you desire for me to serve, my answer is yes. And often the way we approach life is we kind of go, hey, God, I want the good job. I want the beautiful family. I want the house on 2 acres. I want this. And then we take it to God and just say, hey, will you sign this? Where what God's really asking us to do is sign the blank sheet of paper and let God write your story. If you would have told me at the age of 17 when I was wrestling that I'd be standing here in Bentonville, Arkansas, serving, doing what I love. I've been married. My wife and I celebrated our 22nd anniversary just a little over a month ago. We've got 2 beautiful children, and I'm going to get to them in just a little bit. But I had no idea about the amazing life God was going to give me. And this isn't what I would have written up. But God had a plan. And it only served those years, especially in college, to deepen my love for the Great Commission. I had the opportunity in college to serve, do several longer-term mission trips on the mission field, where God gave me a deep burden and a deep passion for the nations. Got to work firsthand. I spent several months in southern France working with North Africans that would come over across the Mediterranean Sea, and just seeing I was exposed as a teenager to a world that I never even knew existed. I go to share with someone, and I said, hey, can I tell you about Jesus? And they look you in the eye and go, who? Coming from the Atlanta, Georgia area, even coming from a family that didn't attend church, I at least knew who Jesus was. And now I'm talking to this guy from North Africa who's looking at me and doesn't even know who Jesus is, has never heard the name before. And that should be a sobering and humble thought. Bobby, I'm glad he started off the service praying for all the conflict that's going on in our nation and overseas. I want to remind you guys, we've got ministry partners in Jordan. I was there in March. I know there's people in this room that were there with me. And it's an amazing opportunity to be there, to see people that have never heard the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, and they desperately, desperately need it. So if you think about it, pray for our ministry partners in Jordan. We're planning on a trip right now about going back next year. And so it's an amazing opportunity. As my story continued, at the age of 19, like I said, I'm in college, going to Liberty University, I'm working with the ministry. I'm getting the opportunity to travel, doing a lot of Bible conferences, a lot of training. God entrusted me more than I could have ever imagined at that age. But it was at the age of 19 that I met my wife. There was only one problem. I was 19. She was a little bit older. And the idea of dating this teenager did not set too well for her. But I was persistent. She's over here nodding. For me, it was love at first sight. And I hung around long enough that after a couple of years, I finally was able to take her on a date. There we go. Yeah, that's it. That's what I need to hear. So I took her on a date. Almost 3 years later, we got married. And we were in our first year of marriage. We had done, I'm sure those of you in the room that are married, you had this conversation at some point in time. We're going to wait. We're going to get married. And then we're going to wait just a little bit before we have kids. You know, we had said we're going to wait maybe 3 to 5 years. Well, around the time of our first anniversary, some of our friends were having babies. Some had gotten pregnant. I'm 25 at this point. I think I'm 25 at this point. And my wife asked me, why can't we start a family now? And I was 25 years old. I said, why not? Little did I know what was involved with being a parent. But we soon thereafter got pregnant, and shortly after our second anniversary, my wife delivered our beautiful baby girl, Emmy, who isn't in the service. And my kids are nervous wrecks this morning. I just got to let you know. It's Father's Day, and Dad has the microphone. Like, this is their worst nightmare. They're dreading it. And I've taught them, like, hey, behave, and you don't got nothing to worry about. But we had our daughter, and on Father's Day, dads, you can probably remember this, that moment when you held your first child in your arms, and you probably, if you were anything like me, you realized that I am ill prepared for this moment. My wife, there had been some complications during delivery. God intervened. The doctor took fabulous care of her. But I'll never forget. It's like I said, it's one of those memories that's etched in my mind. The doctor walks over, the nurse, walks over and hands me my daughter and hands me the bottle. And they're still taking care of my wife. They're going through everything that they've got to do. And the reason I'm not telling you, because I have no idea. And they hand me this bottle. And I look at the bottle. I look at my daughter. I look at the nurse. I look at the bottle. I look at my daughter. I look at the nurse. And she just looks. She goes, Dad, stick it in her mouth. She knows what to do. And I stuck it in her mouth, and guess what? She knew what to do. And so that was my kind of aha moment. Years later, we welcomed our son into the world. Our daughter's Emerson. My son is Miles. And I love being a dad. I love my kids. It's amazing, the opportunity. It's one of those things that I often ask myself. Last night we were going to dinner, and I was like, hey, where do you guys want to go? I was like, hey, it's Father's Day weekend. You get to pick. But I love my kids so much. I want them to be happy. Like, what do you want to go have? And I wanted them to be a part of the celebration. And so I'm hesitant to say, but I know some of you are going to join me in celebrating, but they're closed today, so you can't go. But we elected to go to Wright's Barbecue. And they had a Father's Day special where you could get a beef rib, which was absolutely fabulous. But I've shared a little bit about those that influenced me in my life. And here's how I want to kind of wrap things up. If you have your Bible, turn to Exodus 18. And here's where I want to close us out today. Exodus 18 is a key chapter in the story of Moses' life. And there's been a lot of leadership lessons that have been written about Moses. We see a shift here. We're not going to cover the whole chapter. I would encourage you, go back. It's a great chapter. I'm going to highlight a few things here as I close up. But we see Moses making this transition, and in this chapter, we get to see a lesser known figure that oftentimes is glossed over, but we see Jethro, his father-in-law, come into the picture. And just a little recap of what's happened to this point. Moses has led the people out of bondage, and they've crossed the Red Sea, and now they're camping at Mount Sinai. They're living on manna and quail. You would think life is pretty good, but you guys know the story. The Israelites are disgruntled. And we often read the Old Testament, and you hear they're angry, they're frustrated, they're turning away from the Lord. And we see it happen time and time again. And we wonder, how on earth could they keep doing this? And then God reminds me of my life and says, Chris, you're not any better. But if you look at verse 13, we see Jethro's come in. And in verse 13, it says this: the next day, Moses sat down to judge the people, and they stood around Moses from morning until evening. Moses spent his whole day. The people are coming one after the other. They're standing around and bringing their issues, many of them, to Moses. And Jethro sees this. And you guys have probably been there before. The toughest days in my life are not the days where, I've got to go out and do physical labor. It's not the days where I have to go out and do, work in the yard, helping people move. The toughest days are those days that are emotionally hard. Maybe it was a bad day at work. Maybe there was a family crisis. But those are the days, I don't know about you guys, but those are the days that really weigh on me. Those are the days that are tough. And here's Moses, who has spent, it says, from morning until evening, he has sat there with people just, Moses, I'm sick of manna. Moses, I'm sick of quail. Like we had it made in Egypt. Forget the fact that you were slaves and beaten all the time. But he's just listening from morning until evening to the people gripe and complain and dealing with all their issues. Can you imagine the chaos of having to deal with that? But we see that Jethro saw this keep this up. And so if you want to skip down to verses 17 and 18, Jethro says, what you're doing is not good. You will certainly wear out both yourself and these people who are with you because the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. Now, Moses could have said, hey, Jethro, I'm not sure if you've heard, but I've done some pretty cool things. You may have heard the plagues. You may have heard, hey, we crossed the Red Sea. Pretty big moment. God parted it. We got down Egypt, flooded. They're done. But Moses, having a humble heart, listens to his father-in-law. And what his father-in-law laid out was hey, you've got to delegate some of this. You can't keep doing this. Some of these things, you've got people here that can handle it. You've got to delegate. And that's one of the leadership lessons that's often taught from this chapter, is learning how to delegate it. There's things that other people can handle, and you need to let them handle. And he kind of creates a hierarchy for how to let them know. Hey, some people can handle 10s, some people can handle hundreds, but put those people over and let them do these daily things so, Moses, that you can focus on what's most important, and that's pointing these people to God. And in verse 24, I think it's a simple statement. You see this whole chapter is kind of leading up to this moment. And in verse 24, it says, Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything he said. Why? Because of influence. Moses allowed his father-in-law to speak into his life. Moses believed in his father-in-law. I've got a question for you. Who has influence in your life? Who do you let speak into your life? Who's influenced me? There's more than I can count. There's more than I could ever list. But I do want to share a few people. My parents. Watching them, amazing parents. There's never been a time in my life where I ever questioned whether or not my mom and dad love me. I watched my parents sacrifice for my sister and I growing up to give us the best life possible. We were a good, I would say solid middle-class family. Now that we've got grandkids, apparently my parents are billionaires because whatever the kids want, they get. Not sure where all the money came from. But I saw the sacrifice. I can remember, I mentioned about my call to ministry, and I told my parents, I got my first job in ministry, and I told my dad, and this will date me. It's been almost, 28 years. I got my first job in ministry, and I got the job and said, hey, when we do these things, you've got to wear a suit. And so I told my dad I got this job, I'm going to have to go get a suit. My dad, I remember us going down to the suit store, and my dad bought me a couple suits. He wanted me to be successful and wanted to help me on my way. I've seen my parents, how much they've loved and cared for people, especially people in need. Kevin Ross, I mentioned him earlier. He took a group of crazy teenagers and poured his life into him, all while being a busy husband and father. It taught me the importance of investing in the next generation. How are we pouring into the next generation? There's Jim and Pat Welty. Jim was an executive for one of the large accounting firms. Got the opportunity to retire early, had done well, and retired early. And I watched him. I met him not long after he had retired. But I watched him and Pat spend the remainder of their life serving in ministry at their own expense. They would travel around and help ministries, pour into the lives of families, of couples. They would take my wife and I and my kids out to dinner and just love on us and care for us, all at their expense. Jim and Pat realized that, hey, just because we're retired does not mean God's done with us. God still had a mission, and I watched them serve faithfully until they passed away. And so God has a plan. What I learned from them, I'm not sure. I love what I do, and I'm not sure there will ever be a time when I retire. I may slow down. I think ministry is incredibly fun most of the time. But I love what I do, and I hope, just like Jim and Pat, I get to do it till the day I die. And then lastly, my wife. She is an amazing wife, a mother. She's my best friend. She's willing to serve others. A lot of times we'll be here at church and they'll need something and they'll ask me, hey, is Jen available? I might call her. And I can't think of a situation where she said no unless she had another commitment. I don't want to paint a picture that everything in my entire life, especially since coming to Christ, has been rosy and beautiful. Between the age gap between our two kids is the result of a couple miscarriages that happened. Early in our marriage, we started investing in real estate, and then this thing called 2008 happened, and things went downhill real quick. And I can remember sitting in my office trying to figure out, we owned several rental properties, and struggling with what to do. And I can remember, just looking over a mountain of paperwork on my desk, and my wife walking in and putting her hand on my shoulder and telling me she loved me, she believed in me, and regardless of what decision I had to make, she knew God still had a plan for our lives. That made that decision. It wasn't an easy decision. It was something that it took us a few years to kind of overcome. But hearing that from my wife meant the world to me. So people have influence. I'm not here because of anything great that I've done. I'm here by the grace of God and by those that have invested in their life. And it all started when my friend Greg invited me to church. If you would, bow your heads. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this time together. Lord, I just pray for each and every one in this room on this Father's Day, Lord. I know there's a lot of fathers here. Lord, I pray that you will help them to keep their eyes and their hearts focused on you. What our kids need is not another toy, another gift, more money. What our kids need more than anything else is a mom and dad that deeply love the Lord and follow after you. Lord, for those that are in the room that have lost their father, Lord, I grieve with them. Bring peace and comfort to their heart. My buddy JR with his father, this being the first without his dad. I pray for that family, but I rejoice with Mr. Jack and the investment that he made in my life as a young teenager. And Lord, I pray that you will help us all, help us to be mindful of the influence that we have over others. Lord, that we will be grateful and celebrate those that have influenced our lives. And Lord, that we can use the gift that you gave us, the gift of salvation, to point others to you. With your heads bowed and eyes closed, there may be some of you that are here in the room. Maybe you're watching online that are where I was. You know, you went to church, but you thought it was all about being good. Maybe you didn't go to church. Maybe this is one of your first time visiting. And you just realize that, hey, it's not about being good, because we can never be good enough. The Bible says that we're all sinners and that sin separates us from a loving God. And that God loved us so much that he didn't want to leave us where we were, but wanted to draw us to himself so that we could be reconciled with him, live a life worthy of that sacrifice, and to spend eternity in heaven. And so if that's you, when we close this service, we're going to have our prayer team who's going to be down here on the front. They'll be up in the middle of the balcony. I would encourage you, go to them, take their hand, and you can just simply say, I'm tired of trying to be good, and I need to know Jesus. I need Jesus to be my personal Lord and Savior. That is the greatest need of every single person in this room. For for those that don't know him, and even for those that do. We need to be reminded of the work that Christ did in our lives, the ongoing work so that we can be the people of influence. I want to be, you know why I mentioned those people? I want to live my life being like Kevin. I want to be like Jim and Pat. I want to honor the legacy that my parents have in my life. I would encourage all of you, while your heads are bowed and your eyes are closed, those of you that know the Lord, who in your circle of influence needs to hear the good news of the gospel? Is it a neighbor? Is it a coworker? Family member? Somebody's probably coming to mind right now. Commit to praying for that person and use the gift that God's given you of being present in that person's life to share the good news with them. Be the Greg in their life so that one day they can tell the story and talk about how you invited them to come to church, or you shared the gospel with them and how it brought radical transformation in your life. Father, as we depart here today, Lord, I pray that we'll all be mindful of the work your Son, Jesus Christ, did on the cross. For those that don't know you, I pray that today will be the day that they'll come and know you. Lord, for those that already know you, Lord, I pray that they will be obedient to follow you and share the good news with those in our community and those in the circle of influence that desperately need to know about your saving grace. Lord, give us a great day as we go out and celebrate our fathers, as we share meals and we have an opportunity to hang out. I pray that it'll be a blessed time together. And I pray, Lord, that you will continue to work mightily in and through First Bentonville, and that we can see your kingdom grow as a result of us obediently following your word. We love you and we praise you in Christ's name. Amen. Well, thank you guys for the opportunity to share with you. Before we dismiss, we've got a quick video for you.
We're so glad that you joined us for service today. Before you head out, pay attention to these next few things coming up at First Bentonville and how you can be a part of them.
VBS is just around the corner, and we would love for you to join us June 23rd through 26th. Don't let your child miss out on what could be the best week of their summer. Join us from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. daily for children 4 years old to completed 5th grade. Registration is now open at fbcb.info. Also, crew leaders, we would love for you to come serve with us this summer. If you're a completed 6th grader and older, we invite you to come sing, dance, play silly games, and help share the light of Jesus. You can sign up to serve at fbcb.info.
First Kid Stop is happening July the 4th. We can't wait for this Love Your City opportunity. On Friday, July 4th, we'll be serving the community from 4 to 8 p.m., 1 block south of the square on Main Street. Sign up today at fbcb.info and come love our city with us.
Calling all completed 5th grade through high school students to join us for Worship Workshop this summer. Worship Workshop is a time of developing musical gifts and learning how to effectively lead in worship. Available focus areas are vocals, guitars, drums, keys, and an all-new junior worship area. Join us Sunday, July 20th from 2 to 7 and Monday through Tuesday from 4:30 to 8 p.m. This event costs a total of $25, but don't let the price be a hindrance. Scholarships are available for Worship Workshop. Registration ends July 18th, so be sure to sign up at fbcb.info.
You can keep up with all that's happening at First Bentonville by following us on social media, downloading our church app, or visiting our church website. Again, we're so glad that you joined us this morning, and we hope you have a great rest of your week.
All right, church family, you heard a lot of things going on you don't want to miss out on. Make sure you grab a first look if you haven't. To all of our dads, once again, have a happy Father's Day. Thank you guys for being here. You are dismissed.